Hello, everybody. Today I am joined by the extremely talented Nathan Kranzo. Nathan Kranzo has wore many hats at Penguin Magic. He has released several products. He has lectured several times, and he has hosted a few of our Penguin Live lectures. He is the brains behind Penguin Magic Monthly and one of the most all-around creative guys in the business. How are you doing, Nate?
Thanks, man. I'm doing great. Good to be with you today. Thanks, Josh.
Good, good. Nathan Kranzo has agreed to help me as we try to sort out some of the and talk about some of the best decks, some of the best gimmicked decks or gaffed decks, trick decks that there are in Magic. So
yeah, you might have some just sitting in your drawer, waiting, calling your name right now that you haven't touched in years.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to try to do some weeding. If you're looking for a new gimmicked deck or gaffed deck, then maybe we can give you some ideas, jog your memory, remind you of something that you've put away for a while, and maybe you'll go digging, like Nate said, and pull it out and go perform something amazing with these awesome decks of cards. Nate Kranzo is a little bit of an authority on some of these as well, so it's nice that he could join us. He has some.
I'm a fan of the trick deck, that's for sure. When I was doing a lot of restaurants, it was kind of always like, which one do I bring with me? Because you only have so much pocket space, right? So I always have to make sure I have a regular deck, because I've been that guy that forgot to bring a regular deck and just had like an invisible deck with me at the gig. And actually, that's a good point. Because if that ever happens, you can totally use an invisible deck as a regular deck. You just have to go through and unreverse every other card. They're all going to be rough, but they still shuffle. You can still do double lifts. And some of the moves are actually better because it's like if you reverse a card, it will vanish all of a sudden, you know? So yeah, if you're ever in a predicament, you can use an invisible deck as a real deck. And then if you're almost at the end of the gig, you can go back and reverse every other card and then go back through everybody and do the invisible decks to everybody as your finale.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a lot of sometimes when we purchase these decks, we want to use them exactly as they are, and there's a lot of material out there. We think of the invisible deck, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But we think of the invisible deck as having one routine or one specific like effect, and there's so much like unexplored territory there. We can go in and get our creative juices flowing and just change it up if we're brave enough to like ruin the way that it comes in the box, right?
Yeah, we just have to remember that most of these decks were created at least 100 years ago. So that means there's been at least 100 years of smart guys thinking about it and performing with it, and a lot of the stuff just gets lost, you know. So yeah, what's the first one?
Yeah, so one more thing. I just wanted to no, it's good. I just wanted to make sure for anybody out there that we chose 10 decks that are popular, 10 decks that are great. They have a lot of material with them. These are by no means the only like decks
you should use. 10.
Yep, there's just way more. And maybe in a future video we'll talk with somebody else about, or we'll bring Nate back and talk about.
If you have one that you want to talk about, let us know. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. In the comments below, let us know if we're missing your favorite gimmicked deck. The first deck that I wanted to mention to talk about is the Nudist Deck. So with this deck, you're able to show a blank deck of cards, fresh from the factory is usually the line. You're then able to magically print the faces and the backs onto the deck in a somewhat visual way, depending on which routine you use. This was made popular by, Al Goshman had a really awesome routine with this that was kind of like it's kind of one of the go-tos. A whole bunch of other people before him and after him have created things. Penguin Magic has a tutorial. I think Rick Lax goes through his version of the deck. It's a really awesome deck. What do you think about the Nudist deck?
I definitely love it. It's one of the it's funny because I never actually saw Goshman do it, but I've heard stories about him performing it. And if you know anything about Goshman, he was a very over the top guy. He had a lot of energy, you know, very loud. And so he had jokes about a nudist colony and all this stuff, you know, that kind of flowed into the routine, which made it very funny. And obviously, if you've got a funny presentation that ties in with the cards, that's great too. And on the other side of it, you've got a guy like Alan Shaxson, who it's a great example of an amazing performer. And this is one of the few decks of cards that you can actually perform with doing stand-up or even stage. And he was kind of known as a stand-up and like a parlor platform entertainer. And he had a whole routine that he would do with the Nudist Deck on stage. And because it goes from blank to printed, you can see that from very far away, as opposed to if you're just changing a 5 of hearts to a spade or something. You know, that's beautiful, but it needs to be seen from a few feet away. Whereas blank, you know, can probably be seen almost from the back of the theater, you know, anywhere you are. So that's, I think, one of the great things about the Nudist, or the mental photography deck, as it's sometimes called as well. The first time I ever saw it was when I was a kid. I went to a local magic shop, which was actually in this guy's garage, which is a great story just in of itself. But that was one of the first things he showed me. He pulled out this deck of cards and it was blank, and I'm thinking, I definitely am not interested in a blank deck of cards. And then he said, but all I have to do is think of a card and then just cut the deck. And then he held his hands over it. And he said that the light or the shadows, I don't remember what his presentation, but something about the light will make the photosynthesis and the cards come to life. And then he moves his hand and there's a card, and then he dribbles the cards and they're all printed. And I'm just like, wow, that was like not what I expected at all. It does have a little bit of a one-trick pony feel to it, because you can print the cards or you make the cards turn blank. But if you look into it more and you look up Alan Shaxson's routine, or Gash's routine, you see that it can be used for definitely more phases and different things as well. So yeah, if at all else, it's worth to just go digging and looking up some of the other routines, or just playing around with it with yourself, because once you have the combination of blank cards, or once you are able to go from blank to printed or printed to blank, there's a lot of things that can happen. Maybe you can make 2 decks of cards change places. Maybe somebody's holding a blank deck and all of a sudden it turns into printed, and then your printed deck turned blank. There's lots of different ways to go with it.
Yeah, and you can stretch it out too with something like David Regal's got a few different versions of his sudden deck or whatever, where it comes.
Yeah.
He has a box. Yeah, you can make a box appear, and then you can print them as if they're coming from the factory. I think
the original not original, but one of the older ideas, Paul Harris has that idea, the dehydrated deck. Remember that?
Yeah. Yep.
That's cool. You could use that
just
too.
Add water.
Yeah. I remember Jay Sankey, he had a little vial of, he said it was close-up magician sweat. He said you just add a little drop of close-up magician sweat and the deck will expand.
That's great.
So if you don't know that idea, it was Paul Harris had this idea where you would come up with a folded-up deck of cards, just folded into a little bundle, not perfectly neat, just like a little jumble, and then he would kind of unfold the box, and then magically the cards would be dumped out of the dehydrated deck.
Yeah.
So that'd be a perfect lead-in, like you said, that type of making the deck appear type thing,
Yep, making it appear instead of just once, and it's there to kind of like stretch that out and things. Great opener as well if you're going into card tricks. You'd probably have to do a deck switch if you're going to do anything else besides.
I love the idea of combining it with some mentalism too. If you're really familiar with the deck, I don't see why you couldn't produce a thought of card or make it seem like you are having the thought of card print, on a blank deck, which is really strong, and then just print the whole deck as the finale,
Right. So talking about mentalism, one of a great deck of cards used by many mentalists is the Psychomatic Deck, and Nathan Kranzo has a. Yeah, that was perfect. You set me up. I just caught it. You just tossed it, and I caught it. Yeah, but Nathan Kranzo has some of the best material with the Psychomatic Deck out there. You want to talk about that a second?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually a great deck. It's an old deck of cards, so I can't take too much credit for it other than just kind of maybe repopularizing it. But Bob Cassidy was the one who kind of turned me onto it. Sean Robinson is one of the guys who's credited with the original idea, as well as Danny Tong has one of the first versions that was actually published, and it was a marketed version it wasn't with, I'm drawing a blank because it wasn't with cards. It wasn't with playing cards. It was still cards, but it was maybe like, I think it was countries or something. So you'd look through and look at all these countries, and then you think of a country. So it was still the same principle, but just made it play different because it was like you were thinking of a country, but it was still cards, just not playing cards. And there's also a deck called the Telematic Deck, which is very similar. It basically was constructed differently, but accomplished the same thing, where you could apparently show the cards as all different, but then when they look at a card themselves, or when they cut to a card themselves, they're able to basically force themselves, to think of a card. It's just a really great force deck. And it also has similarities to the tossed out deck, which we can talk about later, because it can be used as a tossed out deck, but it isn't a tossed out deck, if that makes any sense, because it can, it's basically, the Psychomatic and the Telematic deck are very similar to the Svengali deck, and that they are basically used to be able to show the deck is all different, but you can also force the card that you would like by having them cut the deck. I guess the advantage over the Psychomatic and the Telematic deck is that you can actually hand it to a spectator and they can spread through it, and they would just think it's a normal deck as long as they're not Michael Weber. They would think it's a normal deck, as long as they're not a pit boss at a casino, they would probably just think it's a normal deck. So I think for mentalism, it's one of the most powerful decks. I remember seeing Bob Cassidy do it, and basically a lady just stood on the other end of the stage, 25 feet away from him. She looked through the cards. She says, yes, they're all different. She turned them face down. She cuts to a card. She's thinking of the card, and he tells her exactly what it is. It's not much more direct than that. They think of a card and you tell them. And I just remember thinking, wow, I want to do that trick, because it was just, he didn't ask her anything. He didn't pump her. There was no, it was just so direct. So if you're looking for a real direct mind reading effect, I think it's hard to beat as far as the gimmick or the special decks go.
Yeah, and one thing with this is if you're really brave, you can hand the deck to somebody and they can do like an overhand shuffle.
Yeah, forgot to mention that. I'm glad you remembered that. Yeah,
probably not like a riffle shuffle, but if you're going to hand them and do an overhand shuffle, then they can do that, and it'll still force the card that you want. You can still get some really clean stuff from there.
Yeah, that's another nice thing, is there doesn't have to be any really particular order kept with the deck, because the way it's constructed, it really can't get out of order. Whereas a Svengali, you could definitely, like, if you pharaoh that sucker, or if somebody wants to get fancy on you and shuffle a different way, that can definitely get mixed up.
Yeah. Yep. Another
advantage, not to cut you off, but if you drop a Psychomatic deck, it's much easier to put it back together than a Svengali.
Yeah.
So, little side note, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Another popular forcing deck is we can go all the way back. You mentioned the tossed out deck that uses a specific forcing way to force things. Sometimes we call it the one-way force deck, or a three-way force deck, or five-way force deck, I guess, depending on which version of the tossed out deck that you do.
The original one that we all most people contribute David Hoy as the first guy to kind of popularize this idea of throwing out a deck of cards and then having several people look or peek at cards and then you naming them all. Like you said, there's so many different versions now, but that original one that's attributed to David Hoy, he would use a one-way force deck, and honestly, it's just one of my favorite things. Sometimes I'll, like you mentioned, use a two-way force deck or a half and half. Sometimes they call that the half and half, is kind of its own beast. But if you want to have someone pick a card in the fairest way possible, in my Magic Castle act, I do a trick where I predict a card in the newspaper, and all I do is I just take a deck of cards and I put it in a paper bag and I shake it up, and then I have someone reach in the bag. I feel like I just blew it and I just ruined my castle act, but it's okay. It's worth it because it's such a I do a different act every time, so it doesn't matter. But it's such a clean force, because I'm using a deck of cards that they see throughout the entire show. I have people shuffle throughout the entire show, and then at some point that deck goes away and they don't realize it, and then the one-way force deck comes into play and they don't know that it's already too late, you know. And I think that's a really strong thing too, is if you're going to use a trick deck, use a regular deck as much as you can before you use the trick deck, so that way people can touch it and people can shuffle it, because when they want to shuffle and when they want to touch it, they probably can't once you've got the trick deck in play. So take advantage of that. You know, there's guys like Ascanio and Tamariz that have a lot of thoughts on that. Just, you know, when they can, let them shuffle and let them touch as much as they can, because they'll remember that.
Shuffle,
then,
shuffle, shuffle, shuffle,
yeah,
shuffle.
Yeah. And then he'll even say things, and I use this all the time. Now remember, I shuffled, and then someone will correct you and say, no, I shuffled.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And if that happens, that's even better, you know, because it's like this, oh yeah, that's right, you shuffled, that's right, you did shuffle. And of course I know that, and it's just that enforcing that memory, you know.
Right. You know, you bring up your Magic Castle act. Darren Brown had one of the most fooling pieces of Magic that I've seen. And it's just because he loads all of this presentation into it, and when he flipped around and explained how he did it, it was just a one-way force deck.
Mm-hmm.
It was he had built up the presentation to where he's reading people's thought, or he's like reading their body language and stuff. It was very involved, very presentation heavy. And then when he came out, and it was at a lecture or whatever, when he came out and explained that no, it was just a one-way force deck, everybody brought the place down. It was really
awesome.
surprising.
That's awesome.
That's
still.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, still to this day, I always have one with me if I really want to mess with somebody, you know, especially magicians, because they don't expect it, you know.
Right. So I guess that's a question that comes up sometimes. You brought up Bob Cassidy and a couple other people, mentalists. Can mentalists use cards? What do you think of? There's like this conversation, this debate that goes on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an age-old debate and argument, and there's also kind of this debate about whether, if you're a mentalist, you can do a magic trick or vice versa, you know. Mm-hmm. But I really think it just comes down to the audience, and I've really had the pleasure and luxury to be able to perform for a lot of people in a lot of different places and cultures and countries, and the honest answer is the audience doesn't care. You know, they don't care what you use to entertain them and mystify them. And I certainly understand the idea behind it is that, well, if you're a mentalist, you kind of don't want to use cards because that will make you look like a magician, because that's what magicians do. But I think there's so many amazing mentalists that have broken that rule. And, you know, like Kreskin and Max Maven and Richard Osterland, and the Darren Brown, and the list goes on. There's just so many of these great performers who have proven that you can perform great mentalism with cards. I never really thought about it, honestly, until like a magician. It's usually a magician or a mentalist that points this out. I've never had a layperson say, "Oh, I can't believe you did that magic trick in that mind reading show." You know, it's not a concept that occurs to them, because to them, there's not really a difference. You're just doing impossible things. I guess if you come in and you just do a Q&A act, you know what I mean, and you just do telepathy, I guess they could maybe see, okay, this guy's more of a mind reader than this guy who's juggling and doing linking rings and stuff. I could see how there would be a difference in their mind. But to them, I don't think one of them takes away from the other. Having said that, if you do a really strong mentalism act and then throw in hippity hop rabbits, it's not going to make sense theatrically. You know, so there's just certain things that might not make sense theatrically, but that doesn't mean it won't be entertaining. And I don't think it would either take away, because if you've ever seen Chris Capehart, I mean, he does one of the best, like, Freddy Cat Rabbits I've ever seen. It makes me want to do the trick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's some guys that can take anything and make it amazing. So yeah, I guess the short answer is I think that of course you can. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were talking there, I got thinking, it makes me wonder if an audience might see it as something different. And I think with somebody like Kreskin, I think they do. He does like the linking rings.
Right.
I think they understand that's different than this like pseudo hypnosis or real hypnosis that he's actually doing. It's almost like if the mentalist was to start out his act by playing the piano, nobody would be like, "Oh, you can't do that.
Right.
He's showing a skill or something or whatever."
And I think that's true with like comedy. A lot of people say, "Oh, you know, I don't really like comedy magicians, or I'm not necessarily in like a comedy musician. And I think at the end of the day, you're just a comedian. If you're really funny and you play the guitar, then you're a comedian that happens to play guitar. Matt King or like Jeff Hobson, they're comedians to me that just happen to do magic. There's no like comedy flutist or comedy oboist. You know, you're just a comedian, and whatever you pick up, like Reggie Watts. I don't even know how to describe what he does, but he makes me laugh. I don't know if he's a comedian or a musician. He's just everything.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things like that.
The Dunninger used to do that thing where he would expose the key ring.
Uh-huh.
He would say, this is what magicians use, but I don't use that. And he would toss it off, and then he would go and grab a regular
another key ring. Yeah.
So it's just all about the framing of how the perception is with the spectator. Like just like you said, with the. I think they know what's different and what's unique and what's like not hypnotist, like you said when you mentioned Kreskin.
Yeah. So another different, moving on to another deck that is also used in mentalism sometimes, is the Pop-Eyed Popper deck.
Yeah, it's another.
You had another name. Yeah, you had another name for it. I don't remember.
Yeah, well, it was originally called the Pop-Eyed Eye Popper.
Oh, there we go.
Pop-Eyed Eye Popper, and then it was
like 1920s ad copy or something.
There was a picture of Popeye with Brutus or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
But then I think it just got shortened to the Pop-Eyed Popper, and then it's essentially the Mirage deck. I think is kind of the same thing. Generally, the Mirage deck and the Pop-Eyed Popper are kind of interchangeable. Sometimes there's like one little thing, one little principle that's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, like the Svengali principle can be added to the Mirage deck, and then it can be called a Pop-Eyed Popper, which sounds like we're talking in code now.
I know. I remember the Pop-Eyed Popper was something that I kind of discovered myself when I was like really young in Magic. Kind of came across it myself and thought, man, this is a great idea, because it kind of it combines the Invisible Deck and it combines the Svengali Deck, and then come to find out, going like somebody else it is a good idea, and somebody else had thought of it hundreds of years ago. And it seems like it's come up a couple times in my Magic career where somebody will come to the Magic meeting or come to a lecture or whatever and say, hey, look, I thought of this, and they'll show it to me. And it's kind of that. If you were to mix the Svengali deck and mix the Invisible Deck, or the principles behind both of those decks, and
it's really
together.
Think about it. It's almost identical to the Psychomatic Deck, just one little difference.
Yep.
The Psychomatic Deck, you can, if you've got a willing spectator that's willing to shuffle overhand, they can shuffle the deck too, which is nice. There's a really good routine, if you look back a couple months in Penguin Magic Monthly, that uses the Pop-Eyed Popper from Mike Piscata. So just a little tip if you wanna look that up. It's a great routine, and I just remember a couple of different guys over the years. Daryl actually had a really cool routine with the Pop-Eyed Popper that's buried in his lecture notes or something somewhere. Yeah. But definitely look up Mike's routine, and anywhere where you need to force a card, it's great. Anywhere where you maybe use the Svengali deck, there's a good chance you could probably use the Pop-Eyed Popper instead. And like I said, it just has that little bit of an advantage that you can hand it out. Somebody can spread through quickly, and they're not going to think anything of the deck.
Yeah, David Copperfield used it on a whole bunch of his specials.
Yep. It's really like if you spread the cards face down, have someone just touch the back of any card.
Yeah.
That's as clean as it gets,
If you want to do if you're not quite, if you don't have like the chops to do a, what's that called? Like a classic force, you can get really close to that with this. You can spread through it. Yeah, I think the only difference with this and maybe a Svengali deck or the Psychomatic deck is that you can do kind of the spread. You can do the magician, here you go with the spread. Where with the other decks, you're doing more of a peek, where you're coaching your audience to peek the deck. So let's see. The next deck that I wanted to talk about is the Mene Tekel deck, and this is another deck that you have a whole bunch of information on.
Yeah, I just I started playing around with it because I was doing a card to fly routine, and we were talking about
As one does, as one
yeah.
does.
I always liked it because I saw Tom Mullica probably was the first person I saw do it, and he just blew my mind because he's so great and funny. And Eric Mead I saw do it, and he had a really Eric Mead actually fooled me with it because I didn't see him palm the card or anything. So I was fooled by that. And then Matt King, he does it in his show, and he does kind of like a running gag with it. And I always thought, well, that's pretty funny. And then I thought, well, it would be cool if you could just have someone think of a card, and then I could show my hands empty, and then
Yeah.
reach in and pull out the thought of card. I know it's a silly thought, but still, even though it's silly, it would still make people think, that's impossible. I just thought of a card. And so I basically just started playing around with different methods. And to make a long story short, the Mene Tekel was my answer. And not only did it solve my problem, but it made it so it was self-working. I don't really have to do any sleight of hand. I just have someone name a card, and I have this like 3 to 5 minute, stand-up comedy routine now that I've been doing forever. That just it's just basically a deck of cards and a handkerchief, and I can go anywhere and do it for a theater full of people. But the reason I love it so much is because once I started playing around with it, I realized that it's so versatile. You can use it for so much. And then when I started looking up tricks with it, I'm like, wow, there's like hundreds of different tricks scattered throughout the last 100 years of literature. There's actually a chapter in the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks on the Mene Tekel deck, which is up until my DVD, that was like the best source of Mene Tekel tricks, because all the tricks are great, and it's like a $5 book that you should have anyway because it's a great book. The Encyclopedia of Card Tricks has a lot of cool stuff in it. But yeah, there's it can be used for like card at any number. You basically have access to a duplicate card of any card, so that makes it so you can kind of do like card to impossible location. There's just like, once I started playing around with it, I realized that the possibilities were endless. So if you're interested in it, you could definitely find my DVD, which is available at Penguin Magic. But don't stop there. Just find the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks, and just if you just Google Mene Tekel, I'm sure there's some stuff on YouTube that you'll find as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like an index that stays in your deck.
Yep.
That helps you find a duplicate of all the cards.
That's how I've always thought of it. It's like an open index,
Yeah.
Instead of having it hidden in your pocket, you've just got like an open one that you're staring at,
Yep. Yeah. Which is awesome.
You mentioned Burling Hull earlier, because he was one of the guys whose name is on a lot of these decks. But he originally marketed this as the self-shifting pack, because you could have any card and then put it in the middle, and then it would be back on top. So anybody could do the ambitious card without any sleight of hand or any practice.
Yeah,
and that's how he demoed it and sold a lot of them.
And you could do it with a different card every time. Where with a different deck, like a Svengali Deck or whatever, you're stuck with one one card.
Exactly, one card. Yep.
Yeah, and I think it was, I don't know if it's technically called the Mene Tekel deck. I think Sean Farquhar used a version of this when he performed on Ellen. He did like a shuffling thing where he was finding pairs of cards.
The mates, yeah.
Rather than,
I'm not sure if it's Pitt Hardling, but he was one of the first I saw. He had a routine that was called Cupid, and it was basically like, you pick a card, you find each other's mates, and at the end you show that the deck is all mated together. And it was the same, same principle, applied to that.
Right. Let's see. So another awesome deck that has a ton of different applications, like more, just a whole bunch, is the Stripper Deck. And this, it always reminds me, don't search for these decks while you're at work. Like the Stripper Deck and the Nudist Deck, and I'm sure that there's other crazy things. But no, the Stripper Deck, also called the Tapered Deck, or a narrow deck, or there's a handful of different ways.
Cut deck.
Yeah. Do you want
That's another one?
Talk about that?
I think like the Stripper, the Mene Tekel deck, and the Svengali Deck, and the Invisible Deck. I think those are 4 decks that, like, the possibilities are endless. You're not limited to one trick. It's more about like, which trick do you want to do, and if you're clever, you can use it maybe 2 or 3 times in a set, and they won't realize that it's the same effect or the same principle.
And with a stripper deck, you can go back to just using it as a normal deck of cards because you have one of every single card in the deck.
And I think out of all the decks, it's probably the one that could be looked at the most. You know, you could literally have someone probably shuffle for a while.
Yeah.
They probably would never discover anything.
Mm-hmm. If you're unaware of I mean, I think most everybody's probably aware of how it works. If you're unaware, the stripper deck allows you to take basically any card in the deck and make it easily findable, easily accessible.
Even after a shuffle.
Yeah, even after a shuffle. So you can take a card out. You can
what's nice is if you wanted to, you could have like the 4 aces prepared so they could shuffle, and then you pull the 4 aces out, or whatever cards you want, really.
Yeah, you could have all of the cards of one suit or all the cards of one color. You could do aces. You could do a royal flush.
I worked at a magic shop when I was a kid. That was like one of my demo tricks. I would always do the red-black separation. You have 2 people pick cards, and you find both cards, and then you show that you've separated the deck as well. Yeah. And that's pretty hard to beat. It's so impossible looking, you know?
Yeah, I just watched Woody Aragon's second lecture for again after a while, and he has a version where he's using a stacked deck and then that looks like it's been shuffled really, really well, and then he just cuts it like that, and it's completely in new deck order, and he uses a tapered deck for that, and it's
I remember tons of his good name. Stuff. I'm drawing a blank. I'm gonna kick myself for forgetting, but hopefully if I remember, we can add it to the video. Yeah. But there's a Japanese magician who came up with a really cool version of Unshuffled that was basically self-working, where he would just
I
remember thinking, wow, you don't have to do 8 pharaohs. That's great.
Yeah. Absolutely. All righty.
Out of all the decks, that's probably the one where if you were to look it up, there's probably the most tricks in the literature. There's tons of tricks with the stripper deck. You know, there's Bill Goldman has a book called My Week with a Stripper, which is a great book, and there's little things here and there. You know, if you look in like Linking Rings, Genie Magazine, there's all kinds of different tricks with those decks.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've done a lot of like you were talking about stand-up magic a little bit. You've done like a whole bunch of comedy magic, and you've worked at like comedy clubs as well, and done kind of that thing. I know a lot of people are nervous about working with decks of cards on stage. What's your tips and tricks for people who are working with card magic on stage?
I think the biggest thing is just to figure out like first of all what the effect is, and then figure out is it going to play on stage. Like there's certain things like maybe card to pocket or card to wallet, you know, that are kind of based on proximity, you know. So something like that, the way you can cheat is that you have to bring someone up on stage, and they have to be like the eyes in the hands of the audience. And that's kind of what Nate Leipzig did. He was like the first person to do close-up on stage, because he would bring up a committee of like 4 people, and which is basically what a lot of people do nowadays. If you watch like Tamariz, that's basically how he ends his show. The first half of his show is like stand-up stuff, and then the last part of his show, he brings 3 or 4 people up, and they sit right next to him, and the audience lives through them because they're crapping their pants because they're seeing this amazing card magic, you know. So yeah, you either have to bring someone up to experience the magic, or my preference is to not have to rely on that. I'd rather try to figure out how to make the trick to play big with either an over-the-top presentation or just an over-the-top premise. Like, for example, David Williamson does the card to mouth, which is usually a close-up trick. You know, someone picks a card and it ends up folded inside the magician's mouth. But when Williamson does it, half the time someone ends up like thrown over his shoulder, and he's like pulling them up on stage, or he's like saying that in order for me to find the card, I have to smell your clothing, and then he's like bringing them up on stage and smelling their clothes. So this over the top presentation makes it play bigger. There's
Tyler. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say Tyler Wilson does that too with the over the top. He does a whole bunch of card magic that's on stage as well, and I think that it would play just fine. And it is that over the top thing where he does he basically has a version of French Kiss where you fold 2 cards up and put them in your mouth.
And
But you
Matt
can just
is another one, that I like the
yep,
Cards Across,
yep,
making the Cards Across just play over the top, because I don't want to give away Mac's show, but
right,
just adding one little premise. If you think about it, he just added one little thing, but that one little thing made the whole trick, and now it makes it
makes it the
play
best. Yeah,
a stage piece. That's usually something that's plays for close up or parlor. I do maybe three different things. I do a prediction. I do the card to fly, and then I do maybe four things depending. I'll do a cards across as well, and then sometimes I'll do a tossed out deck. But I found just little things, like if I have a card and it's a coincidence thing, when I show the card that they match, I can make this play a lot bigger if I stand and if I hold the cards like this at the end, because it's a natural applause cue. And
right.
just little things like that are going to make little card tricks play bigger.
Yeah. And I guess I just thought of this. Many of these decks are available in a jumbo deck
Jumbo,
if you
yeah.
really feel like you need to do that. I think the um, things like the Pop-Eyed Popper deck, or even like a Svengali deck or the Invisible deck, they
Yeah, I
all
saw
come.
Michael
Yeah,
Carbonero, his live show. He does the jumbo split deck,
yeah,
which is another one we could talk about sometime. That's a good trick too.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So the next deck that I wanted to talk about was the misindexed deck, and
Oh, okay.
this has been used in a whole bunch of different ways. In a whole bunch of, I mean,
Yeah, the
there,
concept's been
yeah,
used
so
tons
many.
of
Yeah,
times.
sorry.
Yeah, because
Yeah, yeah,
anything you think about it, even just like packet tricks too. Like there's so many,
yep,
like Skinner's Monty and
yep.
things like that. That are just that one misindex is all you need, and you can do a lot of cool stuff.
You can make
Um,
cards vanish. You can make thought of cards. So I think of a whole bunch of different things. It's hard to mention specifics. I'll post links in the description, of course. But so many different things as far as thought of cards vanishing and reappearing, the princess card trick.
right.
If we stick with kind of the classics, yeah, you can make cards like move in the deck to
I
different
guess
places.
would we consider the Mastermind deck? Would that fall into that too? I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, or the John Kennedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. So many cool different things that you can do with it. You can take a completely what looks like a shuffle deck and without
Put a
any
new deck
sleight of
order.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, without any sleight of hand or anything, you can put it in new deck order, which is
That's
awesome.
probably one of the coolest things you can do.
Yeah,
Because I would love to just stand there and just do a bunch of false shuffles and then be like, hey, check this out. See, it's all mixed up. Bam.
yeah. Greg Wilson does his Revolution gimmick, where he sticks the deck on his finger and spins it. Well, he shows it in completely
Oh, okay.
all
That's
mixed up.
cool.
Then he spins it on his finger and talks about like how in the first Superman movie, Superman ran around the world or like flew around the world a few times to turn time backwards or whatever. Then he opens up the deck and it's in completely new deck order. So it's a kind of a fun thing. Talking
Greg
about,
Wilson turning back time.
yep, there we go. There we go. No, but tons of stuff you can do there.
Yeah, I think that's another one it's just like the possibilities are endless, because anything from doing a full deck trick to just pulling out four cards and doing a small packet thing,
Yeah.
the possibilities are endless. And really, it's great for just a simple vanish, just making one card vanish. I've used the misindex. I used it on, I remember I did it on a morning like TV spot. My goal was to try to make the card vanish, but I wanted it to happen in his hands.
Yeah.
So all I did was basically just show him they're different, and then just in the action of handing the deck, the work is done, and now he's going through it in the way that I want him to, and so now the card is apparently gone, and then he ended up sitting on it, but can't get much better of a hands-free, no slight vanish.
Yeah. So talking about television, you've done a lot of TV. I believe you auditioned for America's Got Talent, right?
Yep.
A few years ago. Yeah.
Yep.
What would you say to anybody who was looking into auditioning for America's Got Talent? What would you tell them?
Well, I guess the first thing is figure out why you're doing it, because there's so many different reasons to do it. It could be that you want exposure. It could be that this is your dream. It could be that you just really need that $1 million. There's so many different reasons to do it. I actually thought about doing it and then just kind of got lazy. And then the next year I was like, oh, maybe I should do it. So I talked to a couple of friends that did it. And then after talking to them, I was like, it sounds like more of just like you're kind of playing a game for them and you have to kind of play their game. And I was like, I don't really want to do it. And then the next year they contacted me. So I was like, all right, well, what's your decision, Kranzo? So I was like, what the heck? There's nothing to lose here. I'm just going to do it. And I did it. And it actually was a great experience. I went really far. I did like the initial tryout in Detroit. And it was cool because I didn't have to wait in line, with all the other 20,000 people. They give you
Right.
basically they called it a head of the line pass if you're an actual established entertainer. So that narrows it down to like there's probably like I don't know like 300 people in every city that get that little pass. But
Right.
just there's still the other thousands of people that have to audition anyway. So I got to audition for those producers, and that was great. They loved me. I did another Skype interview / audition with some more producers, and then they finally decided that yes, they wanted me to come to LA and audition for the actual judges of Heidi Klum and Mel B and Simon Cowell and Howie Mandel, and it was a great experience. It was probably the most nervous I've ever been in my life, which is kind of funny because I very rarely get nervous when I perform anymore. It's just kind of something I do. But
Right.
I was just nervous because I knew that it was important and it was going to be potentially seen by millions of people. But I did good, and it was mainly because I did things that I was very comfortable with. I wasn't trying to do any new magic. I was just basically doing things that I was really good at. I did kind of like some coin stuff, some card stuff. They wanted me to do specific things that were close up, and I basically did specifically what they told me to do. I sent them like video of tons of things, and at the end of the day, it's
Right.
just like, can you do this? And of course, they're not magicians, so they're just like, can you make her ring appear in her chair? They're just asking weird things that maybe I could, maybe I couldn't if I had a few months to work on it and a team of consultants and things like that.
Uh-huh.
But eventually, I just did what they wanted me to do, which was essentially they wanted me to do a cards across, and they wanted me to do 52 gone, my deck vanish, and they wanted me to do my coin routine. So I did that, and I got a standing ovation. It was great, and it just never aired. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. Sometimes it airs, sometimes it doesn't, and they tell you all that ahead of time. So it wasn't like they were, tricking me. They say you might get completely X'd out, and you might get completely voted no, but we'll still maybe use the footage, or you might get
Yep.
yes, all the way, definitely, but we might not use it. So that's just the nature. And I think because of Magic being so popular the last few years, that's why I was called. They were specifically like calling Magic clubs and recruiting magicians because they want a lot of Magic. So I think they probably had 75 different magicians trying out, and they just had to whittle them down into who looked the cutest. And I didn't make
Yeah.
I didn't make the cut, but that's okay. I still learned a lot. It was a great experience. I got a free trip to California. I got I met some amazing people at the actual tryouts, and I would definitely
Hmm.
do it again. My only hesitancy would be that if you do a bad audition, there is the chance that they will use you as an example. So keep that in mind because they're not the nicest people in the world. They're just trying to make money. They're just trying to make
Yeah.
sales.
Make
And
an interesting TV show, and you
yeah,
might be the bad guy or
and I've
whatever.
even
Like
heard
you.
stories about them actually like prepping the audience to boo
Yeah.
them. They'll actually say, "Pretend you just saw the worst show ever." Boo. Then they'll be like, "And
Yeah.
now Nathan Kranz." So they do a lot of
Yeah.
that audience stuff.
I remember Bizarro talks a little bit about his experience, and it was similar to yours. They didn't actually show his audition, but he talks about how when he got in there, he lit like his pants on fire and things. Um, and which is I guess everybody really liked it. I guess
Right.
like Sharon Osbourne was on it at the time, and everybody really liked it. The crowd liked it. That he got like a very good reaction and things. And then once he watched the actual episode, it was like in the terrible acts like montage or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
and
Yeah.
they just showed it because it was a little weird and different or whatever. And when in reality it was a fine performance, and
Of course.
the audience liked it a lot.
And
So
that's where you have to kind of be careful because you can be used as an example. And we both know that Bizarro has great stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just that framing of whatever producer decides how to edit it. And that's the other thing that you have to be careful of is you're signing your life away. So they can edit it however they please, and I even on Wizard Wars, when I did Wizard Wars, they edited that in a weird way that made it look like things happened the way that they actually did not happen.
Yeah.
And that's Penn and Teller, they're two magicians running the show, and they're still editing it in a way that can make the performers look bad,
Right. So you gotta be a lot to take into consideration, I guess, with that.
I would say definitely do it, but just keep in mind that they're always looking for people to make an example of as well. Because I think I kind of agree with the old, any press is good press, even if it's bad press.
Me too.
Because people are talking about you. But then I think if that were to happen, if I was in that case and if they made me look bad, I would say, you know what? At least I'm on TV. But even more importantly, I think then you have to do something good after that. If you were to maybe go back and be on again, or maybe you go on some other show, I think you just have to keep your face in front of them, good or bad,
Right. Cool. Well, we've got 3 more decks that we want to talk about, and these are 3 of the old classics. These are the ones that keep coming back that magicians always go to. We've got the Invisible Deck, a Marked Deck, and then a Svengali Deck. And we've already talked a little bit about the Svengali Deck and the Invisible Deck. For those of you who don't know, what's usually called the Invisible Deck is a deck of cards that allows you to invisibly and without any sleight of hand or anything reverse a card in a deck. And sometimes
it's funny
people,
because I used to demo this trick at a magic shop when I was younger. And it was actually not really a magic shop. It was a magic kiosk in a mall. So a lot of people were just walking by, and that was the trick that I would always use to get them to stop.
Right.
Because people would literally be walking, and I would walk with them, and I would say, hey, name a card as I'm walking. And they'd be like, 4 hearts. And then I just spread, and they would always just stop. And it was because it's so direct. You don't flip anything. You don't do any weird move. You just spread the cards. And then the line, which was great, was, how do you do that? Well, I can teach you. The cards are actually chemically treated so that whatever card you name will appear face down. And that sounds amazing, doesn't it?
And it's the truth.
It is the truth. You would definitely get $17.50 for that.
Yeah. That's so funny.
That's the truth, right? It's the truth.
Yeah, that's so funny. I remember the day that I stole that line from you. And that was that's so good. I'm totally going to use that.
And that's another one where, you can make a card appear face up, you can make a card vanish, you can make, the original Ultra Mental Deck when it was advertised, advertised by Joe Berg, which isn't the original Invisible Deck, but that was like one of the original marketed versions. He in the actual ad copy, he would say, go through and have the spectator initial any card and then spread and show that you have the other 3 mates face down, which I thought that's a great trick too, and you never see anybody really do that. So it's kind of like almost a prediction. You could also do like a mental thing where you're like, I'm thinking of a digit, 3 digits that are odd, just name it, and then you can use the Invisible Deck to reveal. There's just all these different things you can use.
Yeah,
Bob Carlback, the Bedwell thing where you shake them up.
Yep.
And the cocktail shaker, I've always loved that thing too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Then there's I forget now. Is it Eddie Fields who did the original, like the reason we call it the Invisible Deck?
Yeah, he's the one who has like the presentation of which apparently, what's his name? Bill Abbott has that. Did you see that? Bill Abbott found that old video of Abbott and Costello doing it.
No.
They're not actually doing the trick, but they're doing the presentation. So
that's
they think
funny.
Maybe that's where he got the idea.
Yeah.
So
rather than
Eddie Fields definitely should get credit for that presentation and making the whole shaking the deck and making the deck appear and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Then Don Allen's the one who kind of popularized it.
Right. Great. So that's the Invisible Deck.
Has the version.
Sorry, yeah.
That's a go off on a tangent, but
no, you're good.
He showed it to Paul Fox, and Paul Fox was like, "You should have the card be a different color because you can." And then that's where the brainwave came.
Yeah.
And to go on one more tangent.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ed Bagshaw is actually the first person to come up with the concept of the principle, but instead of the principle that we now know, he used wax.
Right.
So that was basically, so he kind of gets lost in the shuffle because he was never the first to market it, but he was actually the first one to be able to reveal a face down card using that principle.
Awesome.
So, Edward Bagshaw.
Yeah. Great. There's so many things, and I know with a lot of people, the invisible deck is the best card trick of all time,
Right.
because it's such a fair thing. They name the card and it's
It's
reversed.
the directness. It's
Yeah.
the directness of it, because you can definitely do other tricks where they name a card and then you reveal it in some way. But
Right.
there's like some procedure or something, but it's just like you spread the deck and they're all face up except for one
Right.
card. You know, it's hard to beat, you know. That's
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
I think I remember the first time I did like a mentalism routine and I just revealed someone's name, and like it's that same feeling. It's like, wow, everything I did for that person up until now was silly compared to that thing.
Right.
Because I told them some name that they thought of that they haven't thought about in a while, you know.
It goes into this, like, I think lay people have specific tricks that they think the magicians can do. And I think
Sure.
like the linking rings is one of those. I think pulling a rabbit out of the hat is one of those. But when
People
I
know
think,
about like palming and things like that. They've heard those words. They might not know
Yep,
what
yep,
it is, but they know that it exists, you know.
yep. I think a lay person would want to go up to a magician and say, "I'm going to name a card. What is it?" Or whatever.
Right.
I'm thinking of a card. What is it?
That's like the challenge that we all get.
And you can get pretty close to that with the invisible deck, which makes it
Right,
really
it's like,
really awesome. Yeah. Another great deck that has, I mean, too many applications to name is the marked deck.
yeah.
And my favorite version specifically is the maiden marked deck that Penguin put out a few years ago. Rick Lax worked really hard on the design and things. It's got 6 clear markings. When we used to, if you've bought like at the dollar store, if you've bought a marked deck, then you see that they have like little like pin pricks and like little teeny tiny lines that are supposed to help you mark the decks.
Or you have to like literally do a whole calculation and stare at it for a minute.
Yeah. Yep. Just to try to figure out. Yeah.
I think you already brought up probably the most important point, is that if you can't like use it quickly, it's not effective. So the best marked deck is the one that you can use quickly and easily, that you're not having to stare or squint at. You know? That's why the ones that you can do from a spread are really good as well, you know.
Yep, absolutely. There's a few, Boris Wilde.
I honestly think that one of the most dangerous things that you can have is a marked stacked deck.
Oh yeah.
Nation, you know.
Yeah, that's great. I think I've seen a few people do it, but it's just the idea that I know about where the card is. I can cut to it and I can check it without looking at the faces of any decks or without. Yeah, there's just so many things, and like the stripper deck, the marked deck can be in use the entire time.
Yep.
And then you can
touch it, feel it, shuffle it.
Yep.
And it goes back to what you said a minute ago. You know, if someone just comes up to you and names a card, you can kind of almost, with a quick cut or a pass, it's there. You know,
you have that index
again.
You
know, if you're off by 1 or 2, you know exactly where it is if you have to do a double or a glide or whatever.
Right.
You know?
Right. And there's so many good. I mean, I mentioned the Boris Wilde deck. There's the Maiden deck, which I like, but there's a new Butterfly deck, and there's a couple decks where you can see it through a spread or see it as the cards are stacked. Yep. You can tell which cards are where. Lots of really awesome things. Yeah.
I definitely like the Boris Wilde as well. I think that's great. And the I don't even know if they still sell it, but the Ted Leslie thing where you'd actually get the transfers that you could kind of make yourself, that's great too.
Yeah, for sure. There's tons of if we have it, I'll link to it in the description below for sure.
And tons of mentalism, obviously, with a marked deck. Oh man, so many cool mind reading things you can do.
I think my favorite applications of the marked deck is when you don't have to, when you're using a marked card as a key card, or you're doing in all these, like what you said with the stacked deck with mnemonica or something. It's a great way to learn mnemonica or to learn the Aronson stack or some of these other stacks, because you can tell where the cards are that you're cutting to, and It just gives you a little bit of a safety net, and
And
all
almost
those, yeah,
trick can be made better with the marked deck because
right,
usually you have to get a glimpse of a card or something. It's just like one of my favorite tricks is John Luca has a, a version of the diary trick.
right,
If
yep,
you're watching and you don't know the diary trick, basically you show a diary and then you show there's a card on every day. It's like a diary with dates of the year, and then you ask them their birthday and they pick a card, and then lo and behold, they actually pick the card that is on their birthday, which is actually a really good trick because it's personal and involves their birthday.
mm-hmm.
But my friend John Luca has the best version ever. He just has them pick any card from a marked deck, and he never has them turn it over. So not even they know what the card is, but he does. And now he goes, "What's your birthday?" And he just turns to the page, and he just bluffly miscalls the card. He says, "Oh, on September 18th, the card is the five of spades. What card did you pick?" And he
Oh, that's
closes the
so
book,
good.
and it's like the best version ever.
You don't even have to. All you have to do. The worst part about the diary trick, sorry to go off on a tangent, is that you have to spend 3 days
Right.
writing in every single card, and depending on your method, you might have 4 diaries or whatever
Exactly.
that you have to
Yeah.
write in and things. That's so
I
good.
think they actually made one a few years ago that was like a printed one
Yeah.
with like a specific handling and everything. And I think he uses that one because it's already
Oh
made
yeah.
up and printed. And then you don't ever have to like actually verify it anyway. But I
Yeah.
love stuff like that. And if you're interested, it's in Lint, Luca in New Tops. It's John Luca's book, which I'm sure is at Penguin Magic.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Yeah, the Marks deck is awesome. One of my favorite decks, and this is kind of like the classic when people think of a regular ordinary deck of trick cards, uh, is the Svengali deck. And I think we've
The
talked a
king of
lot
them
about
all.
it. Yeah, we've talked a lot about it already. Burling Hole.
There's probably
Yeah,
more of those decks than regular decks of cards.
I know, I
You know
know.
what I mean?
Or
Like
yeah,
from
yeah,
all the
yeah,
pitches and stuff.
yeah,
Because if you think
absolutely.
about it, like at a good pitch, they'll sell a few hundred decks just in an hour or something.
Yeah,
It's crazy,
you don't do that with a normal deck of cards.
right?
Look,
And
you can play
that's
lots of
actually
games.
like
That's or whatever.
in and of itself, that's like testament to the deck. Like there's not a whole lot of trick decks where you can do basically like a whole act. Um,
Right.
well, there is of course, but not many. Like the Svengali and the Stripper, and Mark deck. That's about it. But with the Svengali, that's kind of the goal is to like see like how many tricks can I do, before you get bored. And really, if it's a good performer, like I've seen some guys do like a 13 phase Svengali deck pitch, and every phase is great and
Yeah.
impossible. I remember Bill Goldman, or not Bill Goldman, Billy McComb. He showed me a great handling where you have the spectator deal the deck into two piles, and then you have him pick a card from this half and put it in that half, and then pick a card from that half and put it in this half. And
Uh huh.
obviously, you can find each of them. But I just thought, wow, what another great use for that
Yeah.
deck that I would have never thought of. And Milk Court has a great trick that I've used on TV before, called Sventilism, which is basically just over the phone you can have someone name any number, and now you can deal down to that card that they've picked in the studio audience. It makes it this huge big plays big pack small, but it's just a Svengali deck.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so many things. There's the amount of different types of tricks that you can do with a Svengali deck are
Right, you're
are
not
out
just
of
married to
this
like
world. Yeah,
ambitious card, or you can basically
yeah,
do any card trick really.
yeah. I remember on Nick Lacapo's lecture, Penguin Live lecture, he talks about he has a whole bunch of material with the Svengali deck that he does a whole bunch to like disprove that it's a Svengali deck. He talks about how
Uh-huh.
he made the trick just so that he could fool other magicians with a
Sure.
Svengali deck. Which and it does a lot
Because
of
there's
some
certain
of the
things
similar
that you
things.
see that go, oh, okay, he's like, there's certain moves, that
Uh
you
huh.
see a
Right.
magician do, you go,
Like
oh, okay, like the dribble and things like
you're
that,
dribbling. Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
kind of like patented almost to that. So I
Yep.
could see how if you use that against somebody, that would be really good.
Yeah. Yeah. But you can do things like you can do a false second deal where you're just dealing the card. You show that like the ace of spades on the top of the deck, then
Right.
you legitimately deal 10 cards, and then show that the ace of spades on the top of the deck still, and then you and say that it's your second deal, or you
That
can
reminds me,
yeah.
there's a routine by Howard Lyons it's just like that with the Mene Tekel deck that you can do.
Oh yeah.
Obviously you have that same, you
Right.
have the card there so you can make it look like you're dealing centers or seconds or bottoms. But I love that type of stuff where you're doing pseudo gambling,
Yeah, or there's also the applications for like any card at any number,
Yep.
or yeah, there's just a whole bunch of different things that you can do.
I've actually done it before where I mailed a Svengali deck, just like I wrapped it up and just mailed it to the place I was performing, and then just basically just if the Svengali deck forces the 5 of hearts, then I just force the 5 of hearts when I get there.
Right.
And I say I've mailed this deck. Now name any number between 152. And because it's made to show that they're all different and it's not here, it's not there, it's just this one spot. That's why it's so strong.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I think that about covers it. Those are 10 of the best trick decks out there. As I think it was Penn and Teller who said, and they may have stolen it from somebody else, but the idea of a regular, ordinary deck of trick cards.
That's right.
Those are some of my favorites, and a few that Nate Kranzo has a whole bunch of information on that you can purchase at Penguin Magic. You can also check out many lectures and the many lectures that we referred to here in this video. Go check those out. I'd like to say thank you to Nathan Kranzo for joining us.
It was fun to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go dig up a Svengali deck.
Yeah, for sure. Go work on your dribbles.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks, guys.